I, Dr. Bine Minte,
affirm that I'll speak the truth,
affirm that I will speak the truth,
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Minte. Uh, you already know me. I have introduced myself to you earlier. Uh, I am here to lead you, present your evidence before the Commission. And today I propose to deal with the following topics with you. Uh, Normally we would go through your biographical information uh, in some detail, but because we have lost over 30 minutes, I would suggest that we curtail your biographical information and just take the basic information and we straight away go into the issues that are of concern to the work of the Commission. The first thing I would want to deal with would be a brief history of the security forces of the Gambia, just a brief history. And then we would move on to the factors that led to the 1994 coup d'etat, as you know them. The third point would be the incident that occurred at Banjul International Airport on 21 July 1994. And then the events of the July 22nd coup d'etat and the role you played in that and the roles of other people you know. And then we would talk about the November 11 incident and all the issues that surround that incident. Uh, your departure from the Gambia would be the last subject. And then, if need be, we would give you an opportunity to say something to the Gambian people and also address the Commission about things you believe we can do to help ameliorate the situation such that our Never Again campaign would become meaningful. Do you follow me?
Yes, Council, I am following you very clearly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Minte. And when you speak, kindly speak close to the microphone so that we can hear you clearly. Additionally, I would advise you to allow for 3 seconds between our speeches. So when I finish talking, allow for 3 seconds before you start to talk, such that our speeches would not overlap, because that can create a problem for the interpreters. Do you understand?
I do understand, Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Can you kindly provide us with your full names, please?
My full name is Bine Minte. Bine Minte.
You are a doctor, I understand.
Yes, I am a doctor, Dr. Bine Minte.
Uh, what kind of doctorate do you have, Dr. Minte?
I have a doctorate degree in global and international affairs.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And kindly, sorry, we having problems with the interpretation. Let's have that sorted out, please, before we proceed. Dr. Minte, before the interruption, I was confirming the doctorate that you have. Could you kindly again let us know in which field, in which discipline?
I have a doctorate degree in global and international affairs.
Thank you very much for that answer. Just for the purposes of the record, Let us know very briefly where you did primary and secondary school.
I attended primary education at Fatoto Primary School. Upon completion of my primary education, I attended Armitage High School, where I graduated in 1984.
What did you do after graduation from Armitage?
After graduation from Armitage, I secured an unqualified teaching job at Kerewan Secondary School.
When did you join the security forces?
I joined the Gambia National Gendarmerie
Can
in
you
July
kindly
19.
speak into the microphone? We can't hear you.
I joined the Gambia National Gendarmerie in July 1985.
Can you kindly give us a brief description of your progression in the gendarmerie?
We were the fifth intake in the Gambia National Gendarmerie. By far, our intake underwent the longest training because our training coincided with the efforts by the Senegalese gendarmerie training team to have the gendarmerie formally inaugurated. So I did a 6 months basic training, after which our training was sort of halted to undertake preparatory efforts in terms of construction and preparing the Fajara barracks for the inauguration of the gendarmerie. So that took long before we embark on our professional training, which also lasted for about 6 months. So after our professional training, I was posted at the Gambia National Gendarmerie Training School as an instructor. So as an instructor, I taught various areas in security, from weapons training all the way to leadership, the laws of the Gambia, criminal procedure code, criminal code acts, methods and techniques, as we call it. So I was an instructor until in 1987, when I took an officer's exam to become a cadet officer. So I succeeded in passing the officer cadet exam, and then I was promoted to the rank of officer cadet.
Can you let
In
us know which
19.
year this occurred? The date, if possible?
What's up?
Could you tell us when you were promoted to officer cadet?
I was promoted to officer cadet in 1988. If I could, 1988.
Always
So
remember to speak close to the microphone, if possible. draw your seat closer so that
Okay,
we
great.
can hear you. Yes. Good. Thank you very much, Dr. Minte. So 1988, you were promoted to officer cadet. What happened
Right.
to your career after that?
After my promotion, I continued to work at the training school as an instructor. I work with the Senegalese gendarmerie training team. And by the end of the Confederation, I also work as a motor transport officer at some point in my career. And then in 1989, I was sent on an overseas training course in Turkey. I attended the Turkish Land Forces Command School in Istanbul, where we took a language course for 8 months, and then proceeded to the Turkish Gendarmerie Officer School in Ankara, where we did basic officers training. And upon completion of my course, I came back to Gambia and continued working with the Turkish Gendarmerie Technical Assistant Team as a training instructor. So I continued the training school working with the Turkish training team until the Gendarmerie was amalgamated into the Gambia Police Force as the tactical support group.
Do you recall when this amalgamation took place?
The amalgamation, efforts about the amalgamation, it started taking place when we were in Turkey. We had the groundworks were in place, but it was fully effective in late 1993, early 1994. That was when it was fully effective.
What was your rank when you returned from Turkey?
When I returned from Turkey, I was a second lieutenant, and I continued to be a second lieutenant until after the July 22nd coup.
Dr. Kinte, you told us about the amalgamation of the gendarmerie into the police force. Could you give us a brief description of the history of the security forces, the armed and security forces in the Gambia, very briefly, focusing mainly on the gendarmerie and the National Army and their relationship?
Started forming an armed forces after the abortive after the abortive 1981 coup, when the Gambia joined or formed a confederation with Senegal. So recommendations were made for the Gambia National Gendarmerie to be constituted. And the Senegalese indeed modeled that after the Gendarmerie of Senegal. And then the British Army training team undertook the training of the Gambia National Army. But we were all binded by one National Security Code Act, which is the Gambia Armed Forces Act. So the establishment of the Gambia Armed Forces Act indeed led to the formation of the Gambia National Gendarmerie, a Gambia National Army, and of course we have a Marine unit as well. But based on my observations from the time I joined the Gambia National Gendarmerie, the relationship between the Gambia National Army and the Gambia National Gendarmerie, it was one of, I mean, it was not that cordial. Intermittently, there is this sense of competition as to which force is the best. But obviously, this was manifested in various incidents. And one such incident was when the soldiers revolted, especially those who came from Liberia. The gendarmerie was deployed on 2 occasions to contain them. And before even those incidents, the Gambia National Gendarmerie had a dual function in terms of performing its duties. The Gambia National Gendarmerie had policing functions, and we also have military functions. So what I mean by that is we can prosecute cases. We are trained to prosecute cases. And we are also trained to operate in combat situations. So that is why our training is divided into 2 phases. We have the basic military training, where we learn combat skills, how to operate in combat situations. And we also have the professional training, where we equip our gendarmes with the knowledge of law enforcement as police officers.
You told us that the gendarmerie was deployed on 2 occasions to address or to quell mutinies that were held by members of the Gambia National Army. In terms of the usage of the 2 forces by the national authorities, would you say that the gendarmerie was supposed to be a force that would counter or would be a counterbalancing force to that of the army? Would that be your opinion?
Absolutely. I believe the foundations of the Gambia National Gendarmerie was largely informed by such notions promoted by the Senegalese. It is largely a part of Senegalese national security architecture to have a gendarmerie unit, to have other branches of the armed forces, so they would be counterbalances to each other. So in the case of the Gambia, yes, the gendarmerie was founded to be a counterbalance.
You told us earlier that the confederation which was in place as the creation of the gendarmerie came to an end soon after the completion of your training in 1988. Did the break of the confederation have an effect on the continuation of the gendarmerie?
It does have an effect on the continuation of the gendarmerie, because of course, the gendarmerie is traditionally known to be a French security institution. And if you look at the Gambian security architecture at the time, we have a police that was largely, supported, informed by our traditional colonial masters, the British. And of course, the Gambia National Army, its foundations were largely entrenched by the British Army training team in the Gambia at the time. In fact, what happened after the Confederation, I believe security advice given to the government was largely supportive of disbanding the gendarmerie and having just a Gambia National Army and a police force. That is what even expedited the disbandment of the Gambia National Gendarmerie.
What happened when the gendarmerie was disbanded?
Well, when the gendarmerie was disbanded, it does, had quite an impact on the men, the officers and men of the Gambia National Gendarmerie in particular. One, we largely believe that we were reduced in terms of authority after all the training that we underwent. For us to be reduced to become police officers, that did not go well with many members of the armed forces, of the gendarmerie, including officers themselves. So it affected morale.
But that aside, let's first talk about the reorganization of the forces. What happens to the gendarmerie? You said it was amalgamated into the police. Can you explain which form it was amalgamated? What was actually done in that amalgamation, and what happened to all the units that were part of the gendarmerie?
Well, after it was amalgamated, the military police unit of the Gambia National Gendarmerie was transferred to the Gambia National Army. And some of our officers were largely, posted into various units of the police force. So our commander, Pasalajan, became Inspector General of Police. And my commander, Ibrahim Chongan, became an Assistant Inspector General in charge of operations. We also have other officers like the late Harry Valentine, our paymaster Edu, Staff Sergeant Edu. They were all taken to police headquarters. So those of us who were left at Fajara Barracks were then called the Tactical Support Group of the police force.
You have basically also in the process explained the hierarchy or the structure of the police force as at the time of the amalgamation. Could you tell us about the leadership of the tactical support group and its relationship with police headquarters in Banjul?
Apparently, the relationship between the tactical support group and the police headquarters, it was quite a very rough relationship. because we had if I can fully recall, we had a change in command about 2 different times. At one point, we had Sirif Mbai, Commander Sirif Mbai, who was the commander of the tactical support group. And then after we ended up having Commander Tro Jaune as commander of the tactical support group. So the relationship was quite very rough, very shaky. And as a young officer at the time, I could definitely tell it was all the shaky relationship was all driven by this notion of autonomy for the most part. So it did raise tensions time to time.
Can you tell us the hierarchy of the TSG at the time? Who are the commanders and who was reporting to who?
Well, if I can fully recall, we had in '94, before the coup, Tro Jaune was the commander. And then we also had we had a company, a mobile unit company. I believe Suare was in charge of that company. And we have the motor transport section that was also headed by Diba, RSM Diba, Keba Diba at the time. And I was at the training school. I was in charge of training, working with the Turkish gendarmerie training team. And we also had a commando unit, a red beret unit. It was commanded by Baji, Lieutenant Baji. But the fact that we were TSG, we were all subjected to the authority of the Inspector General of Police.
Who in the office of the Inspector General of Police would the TSG commander report to?
Well, the TSG commander operationally would report to the AIG operations.
At the time?
AIG operations was Commander Chongan. It was Assistant Inspector General of Police Chongan at the time.
So you would agree that as at the time of the coup in 1994, Commander Chongan was the operations commander for the TSG. Below him would be Commander Turo Jaune, as you labeled him, and below whom would be Captain Suare at the time, and thereafter you would have Lieutenant Baji and yourself, Lieutenant Minte. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is how the command structure was at the time.
In terms of distribution of weapons and materials, could you tell us what the situation like between the TSG and the Gambia National Army?
Shortly after the amalgamation started taking its roots, I can testify before this commission that most of our heavy weapons were transferred to the Gambia National Army. Since we were transforming to a police force, it was agreed that the police force should not bear such a heavy weaponry. So I can definitely attest to that. In fact, it even triggered a little tension because at the time I was at the training school and we had our own armory. We had our own training armory. They wanted to take some of our weapons and the Turkish insisted, I can fully recall that none of our training school weapons would be taken out from that armory. So the matter was resolved. Our weapons stayed with us. But before the amalgamation, the Gambia National Gendarmerie was very well armed to be able to contain any mutiny from the Gambia National Army. We were able to match them head on. And things changed when the amalgamation took its roots. Most of our heavy weaponry, if not all of them, were taken to the Gambia National Army, which indeed, in my view, created that security vacuum.
From what you have just said, do I take you to mean that you suggesting that the gendarmerie was weakened as it was being amalgamated into the police force as TSG, which offsetted the balance of power between the two forces? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, sir.
Now, let's move on to events that surrounded the 1994 coup d'etat. Could you kindly tell us, as far as you know, what are the factors that you believe led to the 1994 coup d'etat?
Well, it is very unfortunate, if not sad, that we ended up finding ourselves in that situation. Based on my observation and my analysis, there are multiple factors that are responsible for the coup. One, I believe that the amalgamation of the Gambia National Gendarmerie, as you rightly stated, Council, it weakened the Gambia national security architecture at the time, because the gendarmerie was created on those policy bases to serve as a counterbalance. So we were not able to contain them, one. Two, I believe when we look at the evolution of the Gambia National Army, that brought the British Army training team, and then ended the time of the British Army training team, brought in the Nigerian Army training team. I believe that was also a contributing factor. In fact, I was inspired by the Gambian situation to even write my master thesis on the military and democratization in the Gambia. So in my thesis, I argued that one, the security vacuum, the colonial, the backlash of colonial legacy. Two, and the third one would be to question ourselves whether it was a conspiracy on the part of the Nigerian military. Because yes, they were there to help the Gambia in solidifying the regimentation of the Gambia National Army. But in my view, the way they went about it, indeed it caused grievances, tension, confusion. It alienated Gambia National Army officers, especially the senior army officers, it indeed, injected this notion of brevity, this notion of brevity, I would say, into the Gambia National Army junior officers to a point where they could think about overthrowing a democratically elected government, and as it was manifested. And again, if you look at July 22nd, on that very day, they disobeyed all senior command. They arrested some of their commanders, and they subjected them to very inhumane situations. So in a nutshell, the causes of the coup in the Gambia, it ranges from the security vacuum created by weakening the Gambia National Gendarmerie, one, two, the backlash of colonial legacy, largely as a result of policy which was driven by a British policy advisor, security policy advisor at the time, who recommended that the Gambia National Gendarmerie should become part of the police force as a tactical support group. And finally, the Nigerian army training team's presence in the Gambia, which in my view was, it could be questioned as to whether it was a conspiracy, because even the events at the airport on Thursday before the coup, the events that unfolded, they could have arrested those officers. I know we will get to that, but I just want to recap really that aspect of the Nigerian role.
Dr. Minty, you were trying to explain the... I am sorry I spoke over you. I'm just trying to clarify the role that was played by the Nigerians, as you said. From what you have said, you seem to be suggesting that they planted the seed or this whole idea of a coup d'etat in the minds of the junior officers. Is what that you're trying to tell us?
Well, directly or indirectly, it is my view that when we want to know the causes of the coup, we must not rule out the role of the Nigerian Army technical training assistant team at the time, because from a national security context, we should also understand that Nigeria had a military government at the time. There was a military junta. And of course, the way the officers built relationships with the junior officers of the Gambia National Army and senior officers of the Gambia National Army, in my view, it indeed was very, very problematic. I have experienced firsthand when you go to the Nigerian military officers' mess that was behind MRC at the time. It was mainly, you would see mostly junior officers there, Gambia National junior officers. It was Singate and the like. There was not at any point that I went there and found a Gambia National Army senior officer, from captain, major. So I think when we want to understand properly all what happened in the Gambia, we must not rule that out. The role of Nigerians, their military in particular.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Minte. But can you give us another example that would strengthen, that would support this position that you have just taken, that the Nigerians who were in the Gambia National Army sort of instigated or planted the seed of coup d'etat in the minds of junior officers. Did you live through any experience which suggests that they were doing so, besides the fact that Lieutenant Edward Singate was often seen by you at the mess, at the officers' mess of the Nigerians?
Well, apart from the observations at the mess, intermittently there used to be joint security ventures, meetings that will bring members of the security forces together. Sometimes it could be in preparation for independence anniversary celebrations, and sometimes it could be just for purposes of strengthening interagency relations. I can fully recall during one such venture at the Gambia National Army, when junior officers of the Gambia National Army were seen together. Singate was part of that group, and you can hear them saying loud revolutionary chants, right? So very indisciplinedly, and the Nigerians did not respond very well to situations like that. You can hear them making subversive comments, and the Nigerians, they never responded very well to that. So if you look at that pattern of behavior by junior officers of the Gambia National Army, especially behaviors that are subversive, and the failure for the command at that point to respond, to take appropriate measures, I think in a national security context, it is imperative for us to not rule the influence of the team, the Nigerian Army training team at the time.
With regards to this particular incident, did you expect that the Nigerians would take sterner action to deal with what you term indisciplined behavior?
Absolutely, because the code of conduct of military personnel are defined by the Gambia Armed Forces Act. And under the Gambia Armed Forces Act, there are several provisions that could be used to take disciplinary actions against young officers or any member of the military for that matter.
And it is your belief that the failure of the Nigerian commanders to take action against what you considered to have been indisciplined, subversive behavior, that failure encouraged the young Gambian officers to overthrow the government. Is that your position?
Well, that was a contributing factor. It was a contributing factor. In fact, if you look at the pattern, the events leading to the July 22nd coup, on Thursday at the airport, when Gambian military officers were disarmed or personnel were disarmed, no further action was taken. They should have been arrested right away.
I think it's a convenient point to really move into that particular issue. That was going to be the next topic for us to discuss. Perhaps you should start by explaining to us what happened that day from your own angle of things, the TSG, and then we would proceed on to the actions that were taken by the Nigerian commanders. So tell us what happened on that day, 21 July 1994.
21 July 1994, I was not deployed at the airport. We had just concluded the training for a badge that completed their training. But some of my men were deployed at the airport to welcome or to provide security for the president who was returning from an overseas trip. So whilst in Fajara barracks, some of my men who came back, before they even came back, there was rumors, there was word around the barracks that some military personnel were disarmed, and the members of the Guard of Honor were searched. There was another narrative that the Guard of Honor was even cancelled because soldiers were planning to overthrow to stage a coup. And then there was another narrative that Yahya Jammeh, predominantly former President Jammeh, who was head of the military police, got into some very aggressive exchanges of words when there were efforts to disarm him and his men. So that was what I learned from what happened at the airport. And because of that situation, we were put on standby. We were put on alert in Fajara barracks in case of anything. It was a very loose standby, but that is different from the standby platoon that's always ready. Yeah, but we had other members of including myself, other members of the barracks, including myself, we were asked to be on alert in case of any eventuality. So the morning of July 22nd, 1994.
Before we got to the morning of July 22nd, 1994, you indicated that a word that reached you was that Yahya Jammeh was amongst those who were, and his men were amongst those who were disarmed. As far as you know, as a trained security officer, what do you think should have happened to those who were disarmed that night?
As a trained security officer and as a training commander, what should have happened to Yahya Jammeh and his men that night at the airport? They should be in Mile 2 prisons. They should not even be in the prisons in the Gambia National Army. I would send them straight to Mile 2. They should have been arrested. That was where the problem started.
And is it also your suggestion, because you are giving us an example of the conduct of the Nigerian commanders, which you think or you suggest contributed to the coup. So are you suggesting, therefore, still on that line of thinking, that the failure to arrest and detain Yahya Jammeh and co. that evening was also a contribution by the Nigerians to what enabled the coup to occur? Is that your position?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that was quite another trend of lapses by the Nigerian command that contributed to the coup.
Now let's move on to the events of July 22nd, 1994. Can you tell us what happened that day from the moment you reported to work?
Well, in the morning of July 22nd, 1994, we were all called for duty when an alarm call was made. An alarm call is an emergency call that when you hear as a member of the force, you should automatically understand that there is an emergency and you need to prepare and report to the guard room. So we all assembled at the guard room after that alarm call, and we were deployed at Denton Bridge under the command of Captain Amadou Suare, Commander Amadou Suare at the time.
Before your deployment, were you told what was happening?
Yes, we were told. We usually follow a normal briefing session. When the commander receives an order, in the execution of those orders, it will be imperative of him to indeed brief his men as to what the mission was. So we were definitely briefed that we were going to be deployed to go and stop an army mutiny. That the army, they have broken into their barracks and they were heading to Yundum. They were heading to Banjul. And our duty was to stop them at the Denton Bridge. So we were definitely briefed, yeah.
And could you let us know what were your exact orders? What orders were you given? What did your commander say to you that you must do?
Well, the orders were we have to stop them by and all means, including firing at them when the orders are given.
Can you let us know the amount of personnel who were taken from Fajara barracks and deployed to the bridge, and the leadership arrangements you had at the time?
Yes, we had about close to 30 to 35 men, 30 to 35 men deployed at the time. And I was in charge of a mobile platoon. And the mobile platoon that I was in charge, we were about almost 15 men, about 15. I would give that approximation. We were all
in charge of the other 30 men.
The other we were all under the command of Suare, Commander Suare. So we had Alaji Martin was part of the 30 men. The 30 men, some of them were Red Berets. They were members of our commando unit. So Alaji Martin was there. I could recall Lieutenant Jaju was there, the late Lieutenant Jaju. May his soul rest in peace. But overall, Suare was in charge of all of us.
At this stage, what rank was Alaji Martin? What rank did he have?
At this stage, Alaji Martin was, I believe he was a sergeant. Yeah, I believe he was a sergeant, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, if I can recall.
Thank you very much for that. And can you tell us how or what arms you had at the time?
We were all equipped with with an AK-47 with two magazines. A magazine is likely the bullet container, and each magazine it takes approximately 30 rounds. So approximately we all had an AK-47 and two magazines of live rounds. And those of us who were officers, of course, in addition, we had pistols. I had a French map pistol in addition.
After you received your instructions, what did you do?
Well, after we received our instructions, we boarded our trucks, and we got to Denton Bridge. And Suare, indeed, he organized us tactically. We were largely on the Banjul side of the bridge. Largely on the Banjul side of the bridge.
What time of the day did you arrive at the bridge?
I would say it was around, I would say about 8:30 to 9 o'clock. Yeah, around that time. About 8:30 to 9 o'clock.
Can you tell us how you organized yourselves at the bridge?
Well, we were largely, our organization was the discretion of the commander. We had men on the Banjul side of the bridge in the bushes, sort of an ambush, and then we also had a reconnaissance unit, a reconnaissance team that was on the bridge, because we put barrels, these empty barrels, and sandbags on the bridge, in the middle of the bridge. But most of our men were flanked on the sides of the bridge in the bushes as an ambush. So the reconnaissance team was just there to be able to see, I mean, who are coming, how they are coming in terms of their organization for the most part.
You told us earlier that you led a mobile unit. Could you tell us what was the role of the mobile unit in this formation you just described?
Well, in this formation, our role largely was to be able to tactically move from section to section, to be able to provide, if needed, communication, to be able to provide reinforcement if needed. So that was largely our role.
Can you tell us what happened after you arrived at the bridge and organized yourself in that defensive position? What happened after that?
After we arrived at the bridge, we were there for close to about 30 minutes or a bit longer when units of the Gambia National Army started arriving. So it was a recognition team that came first. And then we began to see trucks coming. So at this point, our commander, Suare, he indeed took up on himself to go and find out what was actually happening, who were actually the soldiers who were coming. And I believe when he went at that point, Jammeh, Edward Singate, and others were probably there. So it took some time. Actually, we did not even hear from Suare after he went to find out. So it took long before myself and Jaju decided
Which Jaju
we
are
should
you
go find
referring
out.
to?
The
I
late
am sorry.
Lamin Jaju.
Carry on, please.
So it took some time before we decided that it was about time for us to go find out what was happening, because we didn't hear from our commander. So we went, myself and Jaju, and as we approached them, we saw Suare was behind them.
Behind who?
In my view, behind Yaya Jammeh, Edward Singate, and the troops. He was lying with them. In my view, as I rightly noted, I believe that he was seized. I believe that he was not at liberty.
What do you mean by he was seized? Could you explain that further, please?
Well, when I say he was seized, I would just say in military terms, he was captured. In simple terms, he was not at liberty. Because he could not talk to us. It was only Edward Singate who actually ordered us to put our arms down and put our hands up. We complied with his orders. And these were the words from Edward Singate's mouth. He said to me, and Jaju Minte, I know you guys. As you can see, we have broken the armories. We have outnumbered you. We are more armed than you. We want to get across that bridge. We want to get to Banjul. If you cannot join us, don't stop us, because we can blow this bridge with just a rocket-propelled grenade. And my response to Edward was, we heard you very loud and clear, Mr. Singate. The reason why we are here is we are all Gambians. We are here to talk to you so we can find a solution to this problem in very peaceful terms. We don't want to be engaged in any sort of confrontation that would indeed split us against each other, that would lead to bloodshed. What we can do is we want you to give us the opportunity to get back to our commanders. Suare was lying there. He was with them, and I said, when I said these words, I don't know whether he would recall that or not. But at that point, I knew automatically that Suare was seized. He was captured.
What do you mean by lying there? Are you suggesting
when I
that
say
he was on
lying
the
there,
ground?
he was on the ground in the combat position. Yeah, he was
At this
laying on
stage,
the
did he
ground.
have a weapon with him? Did you
At
see
that
a weapon
stage,
with him?
I did not see any weapon with him.
Did you see him wear his beret in the normal way at this stage?
At that stage, his beret was, if what I can recall is his beret was the same TSG beret. I didn't see him change beret. That's my recollection. So that is why I concluded that Suare was, when I say seized, was captured.
Okay, proceed with your description of what happened. You negotiated with Singate. You told
We
him that he
negotiated with
needed to
Singate.
consult with your superiors. Proceed from there
Right.
on.
We needed to consult with our superiors. So at that point, myself and Jaju, we went back. We took our arms. They let us take our weapons. So we went back, and then we indeed, it coincided, Chongan also came to the bridge. But when Chongan came to the bridge, he asked where Suare was. We said, I can fully remember telling him Suare was he was on the other side. He was on the other side. He was with Jamme and others. Chongan gave us orders that we should fight. Chongan's position has always been very, very consistent. I want to make that very clear to this commission. Chongan had always insisted that we should fight. He gave orders to Suare. He gave orders, he repeated the same orders when me and Jaju went back. But after he left, myself and Jaju, we decided that we should go back to the police headquarters and inform the operations commander, right? That the situation was out of control, that they needed to come down and talk to the soldiers.
And who was the operations commander at this time?
Well, at that time, Chongan was, let me make this very clear. Chongan came to the bridge twice. So his first time, it was when we were all there. In fact, he helped in the laying of our formation, right? Our combat formations. He was showing us where we should position our men. He did that, and he gave orders, right? So the second time when he came back, that was when Suare.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, Dr. Minte.
Right.
This is very important. We want to get
Right.
this very clear. You said he came the first time. He assisted you in establishing your formation, and he gave orders not to allow these guys to cross the bridge to shoot to kill.
Right.
Is that
Right.
correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You also testified that he came a second time, which coincided with the point at which you were coming back from the other end of the bridge where you spoke to Singate. You were going back to your men, and he arrived this time around and told you in no uncertain terms, as you said, that you guys must fight. You cannot let these guys cross the bridge. You must shoot to kill. Is that right?
Right. That is right.
And then Chongan left you there and went back to Banjul. That's right?
Right. That's correct.
What happened immediately after Chongan left?
Well, after Chongan left, well, we, as officers, we also have what we call discretion. We were junior officers, absolutely, at the time. Myself and Jaju, we were under the command of a senior officer at the time. But after Chongan left, we did not fire. We decided not to fire. We used our discretion because we concluded that it was suicidal. We were sacrificing, we were going to sacrifice our men. There was no way we could merge the firepower of the army units who were marching towards Banjul. As an officer, I am trained to deploy and use my men in accordance with the means that we have. I have that discretion. So we use our discretion, decided that based on our assessment, we cannot match their firepower, because if we do that, it means we are just it was just suicidal. We are just sacrificing our men, and after all, the army will still prevail. So we decided we should go back and inform the command at the time. Our goal was to inform the operational commander at the time. But when we got to police headquarters, Chongan had already left. And we were largely led to the Inspector General's of Police office, Pasal Lajang, at the time. So when we met Pasal Lajang, it was myself, Almami Bojang, Lamin Jaju. I spoke. Almami Bojang was a warrant officer who also made it very clear to corroborate what I said, that the army was very well armed and that we were not very equipped. So our best bet was to engage them, to try to find a peaceful solution to the impasse at the time.
What did Pasalajan say to you?
I mean, his response was just go and engage them, just go and talk to them. We are coming. That was his response. Just go and talk to them, negotiate with them. We are coming.
Let's try to clarify some aspects of the testimony. I am trying to understand what you've said. Your commander of operations came to the bridge and told you, fight on, don't give up the bridge. Yes?
Yes, he did.
Soon after he left, or in fact before he left, you had promised Lieutenant Singate that you would go back to your superiors and discuss with them about the demands that had been made by Lieutenant Singate. Is that right?
Absolutely. I told Singate that we would definitely engage them peacefully. I did.
And you left Singate there and crossed over to the other side, which would take no more than 2 minutes, correct?
Absolutely. Anywhere between 2 to 5 minutes. Absolutely.
And within the 2 to 5 minutes period in which you took to return to the other side that you controlled at the bridge, you found the commander that you needed, the head of operations, the commander for operations, correct?
It was our arrival on the other side. It was coincidental, absolutely. So no sooner than we arrived, Tongan also arrived.
And when he arrived, he repeated the same order that he had previously given, correct?
Absolutely, he repeated the same orders that we should fight, and he went back.
But at this stage, you had gone back to the other side of the bridge just so that you can go to your commanders and inform them of the conversation you had had with Singate, correct?
I did that, absolutely. But we have to remember that we were operating under a very complex situation at the time. It was a very difficult situation. So at this point, I did not have the opportunity. I would say I didn't have the opportunity to largely explain to my commander at the time, at the bridge, who happened to be Commander Chongan, as to the way the soldiers were armed, their readiness, and as to whether we would be able to match them or not based on our capacity at the time.
Thank you very much for that explanation. What I couldn't understand is the fact
Right.
that you have left Lieutenant Singate to go to the other side such that you would go to Banjul and explain to Commander Chongan what was happening. But when you went back to the other side, Commander Chongan was already there. You did not tell him what you were going to tell him in Banjul, correct?
Well, we did tell him what was happening on the other side in terms of the men who were there, Yaya Jame, Singate, but like I stated, we were operating under very difficult, complex situation at the time. And I was a very young officer at the time. And of course, when I returned to the other side of the bridge, Chongan obviously repeated his orders, and then he left. So for some reason, it could be the complexity of the situation under which we were operating. I was not able to satisfactorily explain to Chongan what my observations were overall in terms of the way the soldiers were armed, their readiness, in terms of whether we were able to march, right, to march them or not. So after Chongan left, that was when I decided, I used my discretion that I need to go back to my commanders and tell them that at this point it was going to be very suicidal to sacrifice young men, I mean, who were equipped with only a Kalashnikov and 2 magazines to repel a mutinous military group who were very well armed with rocket-propelled grenades, with machine guns that were similar to more or less of anti-aircraft batteries. So I thought that was very suicidal.
Thank you very much for that answer. Apart from this explanation that you gave to your men, did anything happen in the interim? Did you have anything to do before you had this conversation with your men? Did you have anything to do? I'm trying to situate the time.
Well, before we had this conversation with Chongan, obviously we were all at a defensive posture, a ready position. Some men were largely on one side of the bridge, and then others were on the other side of the bridge. We had others who were largely in the middle of the bridge, the reconnaissance team. So my discussion largely centered around myself and Jaju for the most part. Almami Bojang, I remember Almami Bojang indeed emphasizing to me at one point that this is a coup. This is a coup. It will be very suicidal if we attempt to stop these people.
Dr. Minte, we have very little time left and we still have quite a bit to cover. So
right.
I would advise that you curtail and limit your answers and you answer to the point. I appreciate the detail that you are giving, but in view of the
right.
problem of time, it is important that we move on. So after Chongan left, you briefed your men. You said you also left and went to police headquarters in Banjul. Is that right?
Yes.
Who did you go with?
I went with Lieutenant Lamin Jeju. I went with Staff Sergeant Almami Bojang at the time, and I went with some elements of my mobile unit. Yes.
And how about the rest of the men who formed the defensive position that you had at Banjul end of the bridge?
Well, the rest of the men, we left the rest of the men there. Yeah, we left the rest of the men there.
We understood that below Suare, you are the officer in charge, and then Lieutenant Jaju, and
Right.
also Sergeant, what's his name again? Bojang.
Staff
All of
Sergeant
you
Bojang, right.
went to Banjul together. Who did you leave to be in charge of the men? Bearing
Well,
in
the
mind
men
that
at the
Captain Suare was held captive on the end.
there were, as I noted earlier on, we had the commando unit was there as well under the command of Alaji Martin at the time. So there were NCOs who were in charge of the Red Berets at the time.
The understanding I had was that you agreed that there was no need to fight back. There was no need to put up a fight, rather. You decided that you would leave that point and you went to Banjul. Wasn't that the information you conveyed to the rest of the men?
Well, yes, I did. I did agree that based on our assessment of the situation, based on the fact that the military was very well armed, the fact that we could not match their firepower, there was no need to fight at that point because we were just being we were just going to be very suicidal. We were just going to kill our innocent men at the time with only an AK-47 and 2 magazines.
Thank you very much. I just wish to draw your attention to paragraph 16 of your statement. It's contained in page 9. I hope you have a copy with you. And
which statement?
We have put together the two statements that you provided. The first half of the statement that you gave, that is part 1. Under the caption, under the headline, Friday, July 22nd, 1994, coup in Gambia. Did you see that topic? Friday, July 22nd, 1994, coup in Gambia. The second paragraph, or rather the third paragraph, under that topic. It deals with the conversation that you had with Edward Singate. And have you seen it, Mr.
Okay.
Witness?
July 22nd, 1994, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, paragraph 16. It reads as follows. My response to Edward was that we would not get to a point of armed confrontation as Gambians. I told him that we would not resist, but we would have the competent authorities come address their grievance. Upon getting back to the men, I found Major Chongan giving orders that we should fire at them when they are trying to cross. When they're trying to cross and then left the bridge. One thing I learned as an officer was to deploy and use my men in accordance with the means available. I concluded that resisting and fighting back at that juncture was poor leadership and just sacrificing our men. I then ordered the men to withdraw from the bridge and follow me to the Inspector General's office. That's your statement, isn't it?
That's my statement, absolutely.
So it appears from this statement that you withdrew the men and went to Banjul with them. Was that what happened?
Maybe I should be specific there. I withdrew my mobile unit and went with my mobile unit to Banjul. Maybe I should have been specific there. Yeah.
Thanks for that clarification. So you left the bridge to go to meet specifically Mr. Chongan, who you had just spoken to a few moments ago, to advise him that contrary to his orders, you are no longer going to resist. Is that what happened?
I left specifically to advise the operations commander, my command in particular, that the best response would be to engage them, that we were not prepared enough, ready enough to be able to contain a combat-ready military unit or units, I would say.
Thank you very much. So, according to your testimony, it was after this you met the IGP and he advised you to go back and negotiate and they would come and talk to the men, correct?
Absolutely, sir.
So could you continue with your testimony? What happened after that conversation with the IGP?
Well, after the conversation with the IGP, we left the police headquarters. And then we came down on Independence Drive. And as we got closer to Gambia High School, we realized at this point that the soldiers had divided themselves into two groups. There was one group that took Marina Parade, and then there was another group that took the Independence Drive.
At this stage, did you see Captain Suarez?
At this stage, I did not see Captain Suarez.
Do you know who was in charge of these groups as they were marching towards Banjul?
Well, since my encounter with the mutinous soldiers at the bridge, in my view, it was, Suarez was with them there, but they were led by Yaya Jammeh and Edward Singate, who were definitely calling the shots at that time. When I say calling the shots, they were in charge.
Did it at any time occur to you that Suarez had a role to play with the coup leaders?
Well, the situation of Suarez indeed puzzled me when I saw him at the Denton Bridge with the soldiers. After he went and talked to them, when I saw Suarez in a combat-ready position with them, it indeed puzzled me because, in my view, he was my commander who was supposed to take leadership. But if my commander is seen with mutinous soldiers, and if my commander is seen very silent, that indeed puzzled me. So that's why in my testimony I I concluded that Suare was taken captive. He was seized. He was not at liberty.
What do you
So
say?
it was.
Could you continue your sentence, please? Continue.
It was indeed a point that really it confused me a bit because I was a young officer at the time and operating under such complex situations. Indeed, as a young officer, sometimes you can find yourself in decision-making situations, especially in that particular situation, that could be very confusing. So seeing my commander with mutinous soldiers, not saying anything, not able to talk to me, was confusing.
What happened after you met the group at around Gambia High School at the point when they were about to separate to take two different routes into Banjul? Can you tell us what happened there?
Well, what happened, myself and Jaju in particular, and I believe Almami Bojang, we decided to go back. We didn't join any of the groups. We went back through Independence Drive, and then we took a shortcut to the State House gate. At the gate, I can fully remember I met the soldier there. I cannot remember this soldier's name, but then I asked him who the commander was. He said Lantombong was the commander. So I asked him to call Lantombong for me. I can fully remember myself, Jaju, when Lantombong came. We asked Lantombong their state of readiness. We came to the point that we were not very well prepared. We were not very well armed. Fajara barracks had fallen. The soldiers were very, very armed, and that we should try to find a negotiated settlement. So I played the role of sort of a mediator to try to find a negotiated settlement to avoid bloodshed. Yes,
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Minte. There is so much to say, and we are clearly running out of time. So I would ask you to limit your answers just to the question so that we can complete. We have your statement. We would put it in as part of the information. And some of the things you may wish to say but could not say because of the time constraints would still be contained in your statement, and the commissioners would have the time to look at it and assess it. But in the meantime, what kind of negotiated settlement were you looking for at this time?
Well, at this time, I was trying to, the role I was playing was trying to diffuse the situation so we can have these soldiers in ways that will allow our senior officers to come and talk to them, our commanders to come and talk to them, so we can find a solution to the problem.
You were encouraging Lang Tombong to surrender State House, weren't you?
Well, I was encouraging Lang Tombong for us to find a solution. I wouldn't say to surrender State House, but I would say to find a peaceful solution. I wouldn't say to necessarily surrender State House, but not to engage in any activity that would lead to bloodshed, but to engage in activities that will indeed accommodate these soldiers. That will give us an opportunity to have our commanders come talk to them, as Salajan rightly noted, right? Go talk to them and tell them we are coming.
Thank you very much. I would again refer you to page 9, paragraph 18 of your statement. And this is what you stated. I would not read the entire paragraph. I would read from the second to last sentence. And it reads as follows. My advice to Tamba was not to resist, because there was no way they can put up any kind of resistance, as it could turn fatal and bloody, and that we would not be able to contain the situation. I urged him to open the gates of the State House and that we should only find a peaceful solution to the problem. This was how Jammeh and his men had access to State House. Does this accurately reflect what you said in your statement?
Absolutely, absolutely. That was my advice. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. What happened after this?
Well, after the soldiers got into State House, it was indeed a moment that I could still recall. I could recall, I could remember seeing Jammeh and a group of soldiers dancing to Bukarebu, singing Bukarebu songs and dancing for the most part. And at that point, I knew automatically things. I started concluding that things would never be the same again. So they got into the State House. They started searching every part of the State House until they got to. I'm not very familiar with the State House, but I know there was a waiting area, sort of a reception area where all the officers converged.
Thank you very much, Dr. Minte, for that answer. Mr. Chair, we would want guidance from you. We need to finish this topic about what happened July 22nd at State House at this point. But we also have three important topics to deal with. One is how he left Gambia. But the second and very important topic is what happened in November 11, 1994. And that we should spend a bit of time on that in order to understand what really happened. So I would suggest that we end his present testimony with just the events of 1994. And we call him a second time when we start dealing with November 11, because ideally he should be our first witness for November 11. So it would be convenient if we just finish his testimony today with 1994, and then we would call him a second time to address November 11 and how he left Gambia. I am in your hands. If that is a good way to proceed, we would.
Thank you, Counsel. That's a very good way to proceed. If I had my way, we will go on until midnight. But if the witness is available next time around, we can just proceed as you suggested, i.e. conclude on events of 1994, the coup, and then get him to come the next time around. Can he confirm that he is available another day?
Mr. Witness, could you confirm whether you would be available on another day, say 2 weeks from now, so that you can open our investigations into what happened in November 11, 1994? or would you
Absolutely.
prefer to continue today?
I can definitely, considering the time differences and considering your obligations as a commission, the nature of your task, yeah, I can definitely be available for a second time. We can wrap up the July 22nd coup events today, and I'll be happy to make myself available upon your request in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Minte. Um, Now let's proceed with the events of July 22nd, 1994. Now you are at State House. You saw Jame and some of his colleagues dancing to Bukarabu and chanting songs. What happened after that?
Well, after that, the situation was a bit chaotic. Intermittently, we would see even soldiers sometimes, involved in, tension rises amongst themselves intermittently. I remember at one point when Sana Sabali walked into the State House and was made to understand that officers were at this lounge that I mentioned earlier on. He was very, very furious about that. And I actually heard him tell one of his guards whilst he was entering that building, if I say fire, kill everybody except me. So I participated in diffusing that tension. I engaged Sana and I told Sana nothing was happening upstairs. It was the officers who were there, Jame, Singate, and other senior officers. In fact, they were waiting for you before a meeting would take place. So I succeeded in diffusing that tension. And the meeting eventually took place. And I believe in my testimony, my statement, I provided a list of officers who were at the meeting, lead council.
Do you remember who they were?
Well, I did provide names for you in my testimony. If you, I could recall Major Antuman Saho, Captain Amadou Suare of the Tactical Support Group, for the purpose of the commission and our distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Antuman Sao was a former Marine Corps officer. Captain Sonko was there. We call him Kanyale Manso. Lieutenant Yaya Jame of the Gambia National Army. Sub-Lieutenant Sana Sabali. Sub-Lieutenant Edward Singate. Sub-Lieutenant Sadibu Hydra. Lieutenant Khalifa Bajinka, Lieutenant, the late Lieutenant Khalifa Bajinka, the late Lieutenant Lamin Jaju, Lieutenant Lantom Bantamba. I could fully recall, and some senior police officers. I can't fully remember, but I believe there were some senior police officers. There was one or two senior police officers. For the most part. So, and I was there. I was definitely there. And I can remember during this meeting, Bajinka was taking notes. I think it was Bajinka and this police officer who were taking notes. I can fully remember.
Could you tell us what was discussed in that meeting?
Well, in that meeting, It was largely a meeting for Jame and Edward Singade, for members of the coup plotters to make their position known. In that meeting, it was made very clearly that it was a coup, and it was 5 of them. Actually, 4 of them, Yankuba Ture came in later on. It was 4 of them who organized, and Edward made that statement in that meeting. He said, yes, they are junior officers, and yes, he understands the command structure of the army, but one thing he has to make very clear, it was them, the junior officers who organized the coup. That was him, Lieutenant Singate, Lieutenant Jame, Sana Sabali, Sadibu Hydra, and by virtues of their seniority, Yaya Jame was the senior man, and they constitute what he called the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces Supreme Council for the most part, and that they were the sole executive body who will give others. Even the senior officers were subjected to their command. Edward made that very, very clear in the meeting.
Do you recall when this meeting took place?
This meeting took place sometime in the evening. Actually, it was sometimes in the evening. I would say of the first meeting was on the same day, on Friday, the day of the coup. The meeting took place in the evening, and it was at this meeting that Singate started dispatching officers. I mean, designating them with responsibilities, assigning them to positions, right? Command positions, I would say. So he deployed Lantambong, myself. We were asked to go to Fajara Barracks. I was asked to go to Fajara Barracks that night, and then I think Barrow was somebody else. Barrow was sent to Yundum Barracks, but I can fully recall Edward Singate. It happened a long time, but I can fully recall Edward Singate. Sending officers away, designating them with responsibilities outside of the State House for the most part.
Was Yankuba Ture present at this meeting?
Yankuba Ture at this meeting, Yankuba Ture must have came in late. I can't recall. I don't think at that very meeting Yankuba was present. I don't think at that very meeting. Yankuba may be present at their subsequent meetings, yeah.
During this meeting, did Yaya Jammeh say anything, if you can remember?
During this meeting, well, Yaya Jammeh was largely, pronounced as the head of the council. At this meeting, Jammeh's emphasis largely were security and working hand in hand to make sure that security is enforced, to make sure that he was largely entrenching himself, asserting himself as the one in charge for the most part. I can't remember his exact words, but I believe, whatever he must have said at this first meeting was largely geared towards entrenching himself as the head of the newly designated council.
Did anybody refuse to accept the responsibilities they were given at that time?
Well, at that point, nobody, not that I am aware of, not that I am aware of. But let me make this very clear. When they were assigning ministerial responsibilities, I was not at that meeting. I attended only one meeting. That was the day of the coup, July 22nd. And it was at that meeting Edward dispatched me to Fajara Barracks, myself and Lantombong. And then the rest of the meetings, what was discussed there, how they designated ministerial positions, I have very little knowledge. I don't know how they did that. Yeah.
You stated that Captain Suare was at this meeting. Was he given any responsibilities that day, as far as you know?
Well, he was around the State House. As far as I am concerned, I was not aware of them designating him with any responsibility. Like I said, these ministerial positions, governor positions, and I was not there at that meeting when they were designating those positions. I attended only one meeting. This was the meeting that took place July 22nd on a Friday evening, when Edward made it very clear that it was the junior officers who organized the coup, and they constituted the ruling Armed Forces Council, and that they are the executive body, and by virtues of their seniority, Yaya Jammeh is the senior man, who is the chairman, and Sana Sabali is the vice chairman. I was present when Edward was making those announcements.
Thank you very much, Dr. Minte. I look forward to seeing you again when you testify about subsequent events that happened in Gambia, in particular November 11. In the meantime, I cede the floor to the chairman for questioning by members of the commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council, and thank you, Dr. Minte, for that exchange. But before I give the floor to the members of the commission, if I can just take you back, I have just a point that really needs to be made clear to me, at least. Let me take you back to paragraph 16 of the statement that Council read. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's just the last two sentences. I'll read that slowly in order to pose my question. I concluded that resisting and fighting back at that juncture was poor leadership and just sacrificing our men. I then ordered the men to withdraw from the bridge and follow me to the Inspector General's office. To follow you to the Inspector General's office to do what? One of them, possibly three options. Option one, to surrender. Option two, to join the coup makers, or what you subsequently explained, going to the gate of the State House, talking to Nantombo Ntamba, was a rather convoluted option, in my view. I don't know if you can just clarify the very purpose of your marching to the Inspector General's office, if it is not to surrender or join the coup makers.
Well, the very purpose of withdrawing the men is largely driven by my discretion as an officer. Yes, in every military institution, we operate through a chain of command, and we are trained to obey others. But as an officer operating under such complex situations, I was trained to deploy and to use my men in accordance with the resources that are available to me. So the purpose of my withdrawal of the men was to largely give me an opportunity to provide this clear picture of our shortcomings under that operation to the Inspector General of Police, that we were not prepared for the mission, that we were given we had only a Kalashnikov and 60 rounds each to fight a mutinous military unit or units who were battle ready, armed with all state of military arsenals, including rocket propelled grenades, these high-powered machine guns that are synonymous to anti-aircraft batteries. They had grenades. They had all sorts of deadly weapons. So for me, as a second lieutenant, even at that time, to give instructions to my men to fight a mutinous military unit in that situation, that would be poor leadership. History would judge me. So my withdrawal was informed by good reasoning. That is to go and explain the situation to the Inspector General, so we can, maybe the Inspector General will come up with other alternatives, right? Different from what I was thinking. Maybe the Inspector General could say, okay, we will secure heavy weaponry from such a source, right? So let's better prepare. So that was the reason for withdrawing the men. So the Inspector General could provide alternatives for us as our commander. But even in any battle situation, as an officer, I will never sacrifice my men. Any officer who does that, you are a poor officer. You should deploy your men, and you should use them in accordance with the means that are available to you, even if it means you retreat and prepare yourself for the mission again. That is how I am trained, and that is why I withdrew the men.
Thank you. So it was in essence to tell the IG, the Inspector General, that the orders given to you by Chongan were unreasonable and that they could not be carried out under the circumstances that you described. And therefore, you were seeking either new orders or new command to be given that. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that orders given to fire, to engage, we were not ready. We were not in a position, we were not equipped enough to execute those orders because it was just suicidal. As any leader, any military officer operating under such sets of circumstances would indeed find alternatives. That is why in combat, if you are deployed as a platoon to destroy an isolated resistance, the first thing you do is you embark on what we call reconnaissance, and your reconnaissance is largely to try to gather intelligence, information on the capabilities of the resistance that you are to destroy. So once you gather all that information, you use that information to better prepare yourself logistically to be able to march on that specific target. So in a nutshell, my withdrawal of my men was to lightly tell the Inspector General of Police that, as you rightly stated, Mr. Chairman, that the orders, yes, we are trained to obey orders, but we were not ready to execute those orders because logistically we didn't have the means. So it was ideal for them to provide other alternatives, either by preparing us better to go back and confront the mutinous soldiers, which they did not do. But obviously, as noted in my testimony, the Inspector General of Police ended up saying that we should go and engage them and that he is coming, that they are coming down. That was the alternative provided for me.
Thank you very much indeed. One last very quick one. You seem to have implied that there was some fraternization going on between Nigerian officers and junior soldiers, and this fraternization was of some concern to the senior Gambian officers. Are you aware of any moment when senior Gambian officers raised this issue or they expressed their concerns to Gambian political officers who made the decision to deploy the Nigerian officers here in the Gambia?
Well, I am not aware of any moment when they raised these concerns, but what, as a junior officer at the time, I was privy to opportunities to engage Gambian armed forces personnel. I had friends among them. I know some of the officers. I mingled with them, and there was actually word that was around in terms of how senior Gambian military officers, some of them felt alienated, some of them felt totally, I mean, they lacked this sense of belonging, right? Some of them felt lightly oppressed. So there was that word that was definitely going around.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the left? And we'll try to start on that. Imam C.
man la Imam C. damay maa ngi laajte Minte ñoom kan moo leen digaloon ñu dem ci sala bi yaakaar naa congaan la congaan moo leen digaloon moom ak suwaar ñu dem fa léegi congaan ñëw bàyyi leen fa dem yoonam suwaar itam gën dem yoonam moom itam mu bàyyi leen mu ci mujjantel bi mu bàyyi leen fa mu dem yoonam ñi fa desoon ñoom naka lañu mujjee woon ak ñoom Yaaya Jammeh.
Left as well as Suare.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Imam C. Assalamu alaikum. It's a very unfortunate that we were operating under very complex situations. Yes, indeed, Chongan was the commander of the operations. And once again, I want to make it very clear before this commission and before Gambian people that indeed Chongan gave very clear orders that we should engage the mutinous units up to and including firing, right? And of course, after he left, the situation of Suare was very clear from the beginning. when Suare went talked to the Mitinio soldiers, in my testimony, I made it clear that for me, I believe he was seized. He was not. He was captured. He was taken. He was not at liberty. So it left me in a situation where I had to use my discretion as a very young officer at the time. And based on the training that I received as an officer, I came to a conclusion that my men were not very well equipped, prepared to confront the mutinous soldiers. So I did withdraw my platoon to go and meet the Inspector General of Police, my commanders, to tell them the situation just as it was, that we were not prepared for the mission. That was for them to provide us with other alternatives. Because for me, fighting at that point, using the men to confront the soldiers at that point, that, in my view, would be poor leadership. I will not do that in any combat situation as a military officer. In any situation where I determine that my men are not ready enough, my role as an officer would be to find alternatives, either to prepare my men and get back to that same mission for the most part.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Kinte, and then Commissioner Carl later.
Commissioner Kinte, Minte, I remember you said you went over the bridge to Edward and the team, and indeed you had a first-hand view of their capacity, their readiness, and everything. And I thought from a distance, Chongan could not have articulated their real state and the fact that they are no match to you. I thought before you note in acceptance of Chongan's order, which is disguising, and leave him to go only to follow him, I thought you would have told him, given him the true picture of the oversight issues, and your opinion that you keep your people strategically placed, indeed, if that was your intention, to make sure you prepare yourself and confront. And then you and Chongan, or Chongan with that message, while you do some tactics that will delay these people, say, for example, allow us to do some consultations before we finally know what to tell you. And in the meantime, if there is any possibility, there could be a narrow chance that these people can capacitate themselves from that level to come and reinforce you and so on, rather than impressing Chongan that with either silence or nodding for acceptance, and later just to collect only your men from the bit, fragmenting them, reducing the strength, and going out for whatever.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Kinte, for those concerns. It is very unfortunate that we were operating under a very complex national security disaster at the time. I am a trained officer, and I am trained very well to be able to respond to all such situations, whether it is within the civilian population in build-up areas, or whether it is in actual combat situation in bush. But unfortunately, at the time, what happened in the Gambia it was very sad that our capacity was largely reduced as members of the tactical support group. And the way we were deployed at the Denton Bridge, we were deployed in ways where, after my assessment of those mutinous soldiers, the only conclusion any responsible officer would reach would be to find other alternatives. Yes, Chongan came to the bridge and he gave orders. It was a legitimate order. But Chongan himself, he's my very good commander, was operating under a very, very complex situation. So the complexity of the situation indeed made it very hard for me to be able to very quickly break the point for Chongan at that instance, especially when he came and he gave orders and then he just left, right? So you could imagine what must have been going in our mind as young officers at the time. So in my view and in my judgment, the best thing I could do at that juncture was to make sure that I operate on the leadership guidelines that I was taught as a young officer, that situations where you cannot match your enemy, what you need to do is you pull back. And then your pulling back is not necessarily you are running away. You pulling back to better prepare. But even when we pulled back and reported to the seniors, they had no other alternative. And I can tell this commission that if we were provided with alternatives, if we were well equipped, those mutinous soldiers would not have crossed that bridge. We would have contained them at all costs.
Just a minute. I just thought you should have pulsed Chongan. He may have shared the same view and you will jointly strategize rather than giving an impression that you don't retain.
Well, like I said, we were operating on a very complex situation. So the time Chongan came, of course, Chongan was also operating on the same similar complexities. The time he came, the complexities of the situation made it impossible for me to properly tell him exactly what the situation was in terms of the capabilities, in terms of what we could do or what we could not do. So I was left with no other option than to resort to going back to the police headquarters. And the intention was to use that moment to tell Chongan, but since he was not there, I had to share it with the Inspector General of Police.
Thank you, Commissioner Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Minte. I have a question. I have actually two questions. The first is on paragraph 11, that is page 8. You mentioned some of the causes of the coup, and among them you listed the backlash of colonial legacy, security vacuum driven by disbanding of the Gambian National Gendarmerie. In your statement, I didn't see anything relating to the condition of service in the army. What were these like, and do you think they had any factor as to the causes of the coup? Did they lead to the coup? Did they create the environment for the coup to happen? The second question is, regarding the assessment of the situation. You were given command to shoot on site, but you were outnumbered. Was, in your assessment, was that a result of poor intelligence gathering as to the nature of the security threat at the time?
Thank you very much, Commissioner Carr, for those two questions. In response to your first question, absolutely, if we look at the state of the men in both the Gambia National and the TSG and the Gambia National Army, absolutely, the condition of the men, indeed, one could argue also contributed because I think when we talk about conditions, we are looking at most their social condition, their living arrangements, the food that they eat, the pay in terms of salary-wise. So of course there was that concern intermittently as a training commander, as one who interacted with men at various levels. I did come across those concerns, and the same was true for even members of the Gambian National Army. So, in response to your second question, of course, if we look at if we look at the plight of the Nigerians in terms of how they interacted with the men, in fact, this is a point that I have made clear in my master's thesis. So I tend to question a conspiracy aspect of the coup, where Nigerians complicit. And I think you followed some of the trends that I have given from joint security meetings, misbehaviors, subversive misbehaviors by junior officers of the Gambian National Army, which was evident in Yundum, which was evident in other joint ventures. I think as a military institution guided by the Gambia Armed Forces Act, that clearly outline a disciplinary code, those soldiers could have been reprimanded, but nothing happened. And I'm glad you brought that question up. Interestingly, I didn't mention that in my testimony, but Nigerian officers contributed in helping the military junta write down most of those military decrees. Nigerian military officers were seen going in and out of State House, consulting with the members of the military council. So yes, indeed, all those factors contributed towards the causes of the coup. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Minte and Council. If this is the point that we can release the witness, we should go ahead and then do that and then call it a day. We come back on Monday at 10 o'clock. Is that the case? Or do you have any further questions for the witness, Council?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Dr. Minte, for being so kind to assist the commissioners. We would give you another rendezvous in 2 weeks' time when we would hear your testimony regarding November 11 and the events that happened after that. At that point, or during that session, we would also give you the opportunity to address the Commission on what you think needs to be changed in the, for the purposes of institutional reforms in order to make the Gambia a better place and reinforce our Never Again campaign. So thank you very much for your kind assistance. Mr. Chairman, with regards to how we proceed next week, we expect to start Monday, say 10 a.m., and we would let you know what would be the order of witnesses for next week. Thank you very much.
Splendid.
Thank you very
That's
much.
good. Thank you all very much. But special thanks really to the sign language expert and the interpreters. This is a 3-hour session we almost had, and they're the ones who did not have any break from whatever they're doing. He didn't stop, and the interpreters just kept on interpreting for the last 3 hours or so. Thank you all very much indeed. Have a nice weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Meeting is adjourned.